My wife cheated with my cousin and had a baby. My family kept it secret for years, and now they want back into my life as I've found success. Please be patient with me as I explain this entire matter to my family because there is a lot of background involved. I'm a 44-year-old man who has been married for 10 years. My 41-year-old wife and I have been together for 13 years. We are content with our lives and have an 8-year-old kid as well. I have been married before though. I married at the age of 22, but regrettably, for reasons I'm still unclear, our marriage ended in divorce 3 years later. Since middle school, my ex-wife, who I'll call Amy, has been with me. We were essentially childhood lovers. We made the decision to be married as soon as we were out of college and had respectable careers. For the first few years, everything was good between us, but then, for some reason, things started to go strange. After that, I felt as though she was not interested at all, despite my best efforts to maintain the spark. A few weeks before our third wedding anniversary, she handed me divorce papers and declared she was done, despite my best efforts to win her back. My goal was to improve our marriage. She was only able to tell me that she was no longer in love with me, which was all I wanted as an explanation for why we had to break up after all this time together. I was furious, but there was nothing I could do about it. Since I had no other choice and didn't want to prolong the divorce and make her even more unhappy by making her live with me, I made the decision to proceed. Because of the limited number of shared assets we had, the process was really simple. I never saw her again after that. After the divorce was finalized, she changed towns and shut off all communication, according to a few people I spoke with. Even my relatives stopped talking to me around the time of the divorce, which was incredibly odd, but this is usual. When I was going through a really trying time, they ought to have been there for me, but instead they began to distance themselves from me. I made a concerted effort to stay in contact with them once the divorce was finalized, but I discovered that I had been blocked everywhere. I even made a few attempts to go see them, but neither my sister nor my parents ever let me in. It all struck me hard because it was so weird and I was already going through a difficult period. I couldn't even bring myself to do anything for a few years following the divorce, so I quit my work and spent a few months at home without a job. But I'm really fortunate to have friends by my side who encouraged me to attempt to move on and do better even during such trying moments. After the divorce, my friends looked after me because my family was never there for me. I ultimately made the decision to open my own eatery. Although it had always been my ambition, I had put it off in order to accumulate sufficient funds because I also needed to consider Amy during our marriage. But because we were divorced, I made the decision to go ahead and do it alone. I also chose to call the restaurant the name my parents had recommended. My buddies helped me approach a few potential investors, secure their support and begin developing a business plan. I opened my own restaurant a few years later. After the divorce, it took me about 4 years to get back on my feet. I met my current wife 2 years later. We started conversing after she told me she loved my restaurant at a function where we met through friends. I asked her to marry me after 3 years of dating because I wanted to give love another try. Here we are with our son 10 years later. My business life has also improved over the past few years, in addition to my personal life. In my career, I've done fairly well. It all began with a restaurant, but because of its success, we gradually started to grow. I am the CEO of my own hospitality firm at the moment, and we operate a chain of hotels and restaurants that are quite well liked. We intend to grow it even further in the hopes of gaining recognition outside of the state. I have put a lot of effort into getting to where I am now, but it has been a difficult journey. Since of this, I recently agreed to an interview since I felt it was an indication that I had truly made it. However, after seeing that interview on the television, my family decided to get in touch with me again, and I honestly had no clue that it would generate such a storm in my life. I didn't really think my family would have watched it because the channel that carried it was a somewhat popular one. Even if they had, I didn't think they would arrive at my workplace. My workplace's location isn't particularly discreet, so they must have had little trouble finding me. Still, it was highly improper of them to arrive at my place of employment and insist on seeing me while I was there. Regretfully, they did precisely that 3 days ago. Seeing them after all this time was really odd. The receptionist told me that my family was waiting outside when they arrived, even though I was working. I initially assumed she was referring to my wife and kid, which would have been strange given that my son was at school and my wife was at work. She went on to say that my sister and parents were present to see me. I was having trouble processing what was happening at the time. I informed the receptionist that they would have to be ordered to go for the time being, but I would see them later. Naturally, they persisted and were making a scene, so I had to step in. Before I could talk to them and find out what was going on, I didn't want security to eject them from the premises. I therefore walked to the lobby to see them. They immediately pretended that nothing had changed in the over 2 decades since I had last seen them. They started praising me right away, telling me how wonderful it was that I had achieved enough accomplishment to make the headlines and how motivational my tale was. They should have been included in that story as members of my family, so hearing them say it felt odd. They began discussing how they had seen my family, but I tried to dismiss it by telling them I had to return to work. I had mentioned in my interview how helpful my wife and son had been to me along the way. They were referring to certain family images that were also featured on the channel. Since they had been away from us for a while, they began to express a wish to meet my wife and their grandson as soon as possible. At that point, they said I should have done more to reach out to them after the divorce and chastised me for not trying hard enough. It dawned on me that I might at last be able to find out what had transpired at that time. Therefore, rather than telling them to leave, I chose to let them speak. In an attempt to find some closure, I even sat down with them in the lobby. During their conversation, I learned the true reason my family had deserted me and why Amy had chosen to divorce me. Yes, Amy had been cheating on me, as you may have surmised by now. My parents had been helping her hide it the entire time, so I had never suspected it. However, they stated that they had their reasons, or at least, those they believed to be legitimate, so don't pass judgment too hastily. Amy had apparently been having an affair with my cousin, who was the son of my dad's older brother. Everything made sense when they eventually told me. I now saw why they had supported her, why I hadn't received an invitation to any family gatherings for the previous 20 years, and why I had been rejected without any fault of my own. I had never liked my cousin, let's call him Carl, since he was a rude, entitled brat. Unfortunately, his father and the rest of the family felt he should be given a free pass for everything because his mother had died when he was only 6 months old. No one ever told him how to act throughout his life, and he consistently got away with anything. The fact that my uncle, Carl's father, was my dad's supervisor and had founded the family business before my dad joined it didn't help either. When Carl decided he wanted to be with Amy after we were married and she agreed, my family felt compelled to support them. They couldn't take the chance of upsetting my uncle. But apparently it was easy for them to decide to risk their friendship with me. They did precisely that. They also informed me that my uncle made it very apparent during the divorce that he did not want any family members, including my parents and sister, to communicate with me in any way. After Amy said she was expecting my child, they apparently attempted to object. They would have to cut me off if they ever wished to communicate with their grandson. In addition, when Amy filed for divorce, I was never informed that she was expecting a child. I couldn't have predicted because she hadn't been displaying at the time either. She had moved out long before the divorce was finalized, so she hadn't been living with me. Therefore, even before my son was born, I was unaware that I had become a father. It seems that my daughter, who is now almost 20, believes Carl is her biological father even though she has never met me. In any case, my parents told me this about what actually occurred all those years ago. It felt like I was being told a story, and I was hardly able to process any of it at the time. To acknowledge that this was my reality, I had to pinch myself. My family thought that by achieving job security and establishing a bond with their granddaughter, they had effectively cut me off. They had cut me off because, in my opinion, they were simply cowards. They could have simply told me the truth and let me deal with it, but instead they decided to be scared of my dad's brother, acting as though he could do more than just drive my father out of the family business. My dad could have taken legal action in retaliation even at that point. I honestly can't think of a reason why you didn't notify me about Amy's pregnancy or the fact that I have a daughter. They sat on this for 20 years without saying anything until they realized I was doing well in life. They suddenly felt a great deal of pity for everything and wanted to make amends with me. Sadly for them, I was able to see through their deception. I told them I needed them to go as soon as they were done telling me everything because I didn't have the capacity to forgive them right now after what they had just told me. Since we were seated in my workplace's lobby and I didn't want to start a fight, I made an effort to be polite. I couldn't, however, rely on others to act similarly. As soon as I told them to go, they began complaining that I should consider their point of view and how challenging the situation had been for them as well. I informed them that I was positive they were only contacting me now because they wanted a share of my success. They strongly rejected it. My sister even went so far as to argue that they were the reason I was successful in the first place, as they had come up with the name for my restaurant back when it was still just a dream. Given that they hadn't helped me over the years and that I had created everything on my own with the assistance of my friends rather than them, I thought it was rather brave of her to make such a claim. It wasn't enough for them to claim credit for my accomplishment just because they suggested a name. I laughed at her because the idea was so ridiculous. I threatened to have her and my parents ejected from the building if they didn't leave right away. They persisted in their argument, stating that they would not go until we had resolved our differences. But I was not interested in carrying on the discussion. I therefore carried out my promise and had security eject them from the building. As they were being led away, they were obviously very unhappy and tried attempting to convince me that they had no other option. However, I don't believe that. They had an option, but they chose poorly, and now they will have to live with the repercussions. They have survived the previous 20 years without seeing me or my family, so I have no doubt that they will be able to do the same in the future. In any case, they haven't stopped attempting to get in touch with me 3 days after this happened. They haven't had the guts to return inside my workplace, but they have been showing up outside, sending emails to my work address, and texting me on social media. Their attitude has clearly changed as seen by the numerous apologies in their mails. They appear somewhat agitated as they wait for me to stop for them outside my place of employment. However, I ignore them and simply drive past. I almost feel sorry for them now because of how horrible things have gone. To be honest, I've discussed this with my wife because, no matter what I do about my family, we still need to consider my daughter, whom I was unaware of until a few days ago. We have been debating whether or not to track down my daughter and attempt to get in touch with her. We also have to deal with my family, who I don't think will leave until they have another opportunity to talk to me. My wife believes that perhaps I should invite them over and have a conversation with them in order to at least try to resolve the issue. Since this circumstance isn't healthy for my emotional health, she thinks it might help get rid of all the toxicity. But I'm not personally interested in doing it. Given everything I've learned and what I'm going through right now, I don't have the mental capacity to deal with them, so I just want to keep ignoring them till they go away. We are struggling greatly to decide how to proceed and handle this. After 20 years of no communication, I also question whether I'm wrong for not wanting to give my parents another chance to talk. Update 1. A week and 3 days have passed since my initial post, and my spouse and I have made the decision to keep ignoring my relatives. Fortunately, they haven't been showing up to my place of employment for the previous several days. This is most likely due to their fatigue or fear of security. In any case, I'm glad. It was much simpler for me to quit thinking about them after they stopped visiting. It appears that I was feeling guilty about how I was handling the matter because of their presence. I no longer feel bad about not responding to their texts. No matter how many times they apologize, nothing will change. No amount of apologies will make up for the fact that they have failed me as a family. I'm not even bothering to block them anymore, even though they've kept sending messages from different accounts and email addresses. What's the point? I'll continue to ignore them even if they try to apologize by making new accounts. We'll see how long they can continue this. Let's go on to the other problem we are facing, my daughter. Neither my wife nor I knew how to handle the matter. My parents told me where she attends college throughout our talk, so we have her name. I haven't taken any action yet, but my assistant was able to locate her social media profiles. I am unsure of if it is appropriate for me to contact her, and I'm unsure of how to inform her that I am her biological father. I can't just walk up to Amy's house and demand custody or anything because she's not a kid. Furthermore, given what I've learned about Amy, I'd prefer not to have her involved in this at all. I no longer have any regard for that woman or my family as a whole because they are all cowards with no courage, and I don't want anything to do with them. I can't say the same for my kid though. She is still my biological daughter, regardless of who reared her. Please let me know if you have any suggestions about how to approach her or if I should even be doing this. I also want to thank everyone who left a remark on my first post. I hope you can help me again because your advice has been incredibly useful. Update 2. My wife and I made the decision to move ahead after reading the comments on my last update. Waiting for the ideal moment or chance to get in touch with my daughter was pointless. We had to remove the band-aid and finish the job. We thought it wouldn't be appropriate to fly out to her because she lives in a different state, so we chose to message her first and see how things work out. We messaged her on Instagram and gave her the most polite explanation possible. We are merely awaiting a response at this time. She will undoubtedly find it difficult to accept, just as it is for me. The fact that my wife has been so understanding of my efforts to reconnect with my long-lost kid from my previous marriage is beyond me. We're trying our best, but I'm sure it's bringing up a lot of complex feelings for all of us. I would love to establish a relationship with my daughter, therefore I sincerely hope she responds. My parents haven't visited my place of employment in a long time. They wrote me a lengthy email yesterday in which they expressed their sincere regret for everything and their want to mend our friendship. They only required one opportunity. Additionally, they indicated they would wait for me to get in touch with them before contacting me again. To be honest, I'm a little relieved that they finally understood that I don't want to talk to them at this time. The last thing I need is for them to add additional drama to my already full plate. All I can hope for now is that they follow through on their promise and don't get in touch with me again. I will talk to them myself if I feel ready or want to at any time. But at this point, it doesn't appear probable that this will occur anytime soon. The situation has only gotten worse now that I know the true reason they haven't spoken to me in 20 years. I don't think the feeling of betrayal and hurt will go away anytime soon. There was at least one positive outcome from this. I learned more about my daughter, and I'm hoping she will choose to give our relationship another shot. In case she doesn't want to speak with us, I haven't yet told my kid about her. I don't want to give him unrealistic expectations. But if everything works out, he might see her as a sister, and I might meet the daughter I never knew I had. Right now, I'm feeling a lot of different emotions, and I'm making a lot of effort to control them. Update 3. I made contact with my daughter on social media approximately 2 weeks ago. I messaged her, telling her everything about myself and our relationship. I finally got a response today after waiting for 2 weeks. She only mentioned that she had discussed me with her mother and that she had discovered that I am her biological father. She was shocked by this, of course. She had no notion that she wasn't Carl's daughter and had thought he was her biological father for the last 20 years. She also told me that she wanted to see me and my family after learning the real tale of how her mother and I got to be this way. Since she doesn't have the money to visit us at this time and isn't talking to her family, we are taking a plane to see her this weekend. She didn't go into too much detail, but Amy first attempted to deny the message when she challenged her about it. But in the end, she had to be honest with her. Since I don't want to talk to Amy, I sincerely hope she doesn't get in touch with me. I haven't heard from her yet. When my family learned that I had contacted my daughter, they promptly betrayed their word and began attempting to speak with me. My uncle was obviously upset that I found out, and rightfully so, as they had worked for 20 years to make sure I never found out so that their lives wouldn't be disturbed. I've learned that my uncle is blaming my parents. My dad still fears his older brother, despite the fact that he no longer works for him and owns his own company. He has been pleading with me to explain that neither Carl nor my uncle were involved in my discovery, but I fail to understand the purpose. They are the only ones who could have maintained such a secret, so even if I did, I doubt anyone would believe me. The majority of my family has never been close to me, and they haven't bothered to talk to me in 20 years. It's amusing how frantic they are right now to keep their friendship with my uncle intact. But to be honest, I don't give a damn. I lost out on 20 years of a relationship with my daughter because of them. This, I believe, is the least I can do. Update 4. I finally got to meet my kid today with my family. It was initially uncomfortable, then moved, but overall it was simply lovely. Despite having grown up with two of the worst people I've ever met, she seems to be a decent and caring person. She is a very mature and clever young woman, whether it is due to her natural disposition or to the fact that they raised her well. During our lengthy talk, we discussed Amy and Carl's situation. She told me that she didn't care that they didn't approve of her meeting us. She doesn't care what her folks think now that she knows the truth. She doesn't intend to eliminate Amy and Carl from her life entirely because they don't have any other children but her, but she will undoubtedly put them out of her life for a while as she tries to come to terms with everything. She informed me that she also needed time to begin developing a relationship with me. I completely understand that she's in a really strange mental state at the moment. She seemed to get along well with my wife and her half-brother, and we had a great day overall. During supper, we discovered that my parents, who are her grandparents, had maintained communication with her throughout the entire time. Given that they were her grandfather's brother's family rather than her biological grandparents, she always thought it was odd how sentimental they were about her. Now they understand why they were so devoted to her. But now that she has learned all of this, she and I both view them differently. Since I'm a lot older than her, I can probably relate to her feelings, but not totally. Having been deceived by those she thought were closest to her throughout her life, she is just 20 years old and is likely finding it much more difficult to cope. In any case, we will both need to work on this, and maybe things will improve in the future. We're going to make an effort to make it the greatest it can be, so I know it must be. The fact that the meeting went well and that my family and I both seem satisfied after everything makes me very happy. No matter what Carl, Amy, or my family have done, I'm also rather happy with the situation. The important thing is that we finally have an opportunity to put things right after all these years, and I'm going to take advantage of it. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. My stepmom left my dad after I refused to let her walk me down the aisle, and now he has a shocking confession before my wedding. I'm Lily, a 28-year-old woman who will marry her fiancé Richard, a 30-year-old man, in 3 months. To comprehend my current circumstances, I must return to my childhood. My parents, Claire, 53F, and Tom, 55M, met at college and married young. They had me when they were both 25, and for the first 10 years of my existence, we seemed like the ideal family. I remember spending weekends at my grandparents' lake house, where Dad taught me how to fish while Mom made lunches. Every Friday, we had family game night, and my parents took turns reading me bedtime stories. It wasn't perfect, they argued like any couple, but I always felt loved and secure. Everything changed when I was 10. Dad began working late more frequently, and Mom appeared increasingly tense and sad. I overheard arguments about someone named Tanya, but I had no idea what was going on. Then, one day, I returned home from school to find Mom crying in the kitchen. She sat me down and told me that Dad had an affair with his coworker, Tanya, 48F, and they were getting divorced. The following few months were a jumble of tears, conflicts, and bewilderment. Dad moved out, and I remember being furious with him for hurting Mom and splitting up our family. The divorce was messy and traumatic. There were intense debates over custody and property partition. I recall sitting outside the courtroom during one of their sessions, feeling disoriented and terrified. In the end, Mom received primary custody, with Dad receiving visits every other weekend. At first, I was hesitant to spend time with Dad. I was angry and sad, and I did not want to leave Mom alone. Mom, despite her own anguish, pushed me to give Dad another chance. She informed me, "Your father made a mistake, but he still loves you. It's fine to adore him too." Gradually, I began to like spending weekends with Dad. He'd take me to the movies, show me how to cook, badly, and we'd have lengthy discussions about school and my friends. Things became more problematic when Dad declared 2 years after the divorce that he was marrying Tanya. Tanya and I met for the first time at a dinner Dad had arranged. She appeared pleasant enough, bringing me a gift, a diary with my name embossed on it, and inquiring about my interests. But I couldn't get rid of the idea that she was the reason my family had come apart. Tanya worked hard to establish a bond with me after Dad and Tanya married. She was constantly buying me gifts, clothes, books, art supplies, and recommending mother-daughter activities such as spa days or cooking classes. However, her efforts felt forced to me, and I was never comfortable around her. Part of it was out of loyalty to my mother, and part of it was because Tanya appeared to be attempting to replace her. As I approached adolescence, my connection with Dad and Tanya deteriorated. They would frequently make disparaging remarks about Mom, such as, "It's a shame your mother is so bitter," or, "If only your mother could move on like we have." These statements bothered me because I understood how hard Mom worked to co-parent harmoniously. My mother, on the other hand, never spoke negatively about Dad or Tanya in front of me. She listened to my complaints but always pushed me to give them another shot. "They're not perfect," she'd continue, "but they try. It's acceptable to have many relationships with different people in your life." Tanya became pregnant when I was 16 years old. Dad was overjoyed, continually mentioning how happy he was to have a real family, now. Those words struck deep because they made me feel like I wasn't enough for him. Like I was a relic of his past rather than an important part of his new existence. Tanya had a miscarriage at 20 weeks. It was a tough time for them, and I recall feeling a combination of anguish for their loss and guilty relief that I would not be replaced by a new baby. Dad informed me that Tanya would require additional love and support from me, which put a lot of strain on me at a time when I was already dealing with usual teenage concerns and the lingering consequences from the divorce. Tanya's attachment to me grew stronger following the miscarriage. She began introducing me to everyone as her daughter, which made me very uncomfortable. She also started urging me to call her Mom, something I flatly refused to do. This resulted in several arguments, with Dad always siding with Tanya and accusing me of being insensitive to her feelings. During this time, my relationship with my mother remained solid. She was my rock, always willing to listen without judgment and provide support without pressuring. She encouraged me to pursue my interests, which led to me joining the school newspaper and later studying journalism in college. I met Richard in college. We were both writing for the campus paper and bonded over our shared interest in investigative reporting. Richard's family was much easier than mine. His parents were still happily married and he had 2 younger siblings. I was initially cautious to let him inside my delicate family relationships, but his tolerance and understanding allowed me to open up. All of these previous concerns have finally come to a head as we prepare our wedding. I have chosen to ask my mother to walk me down the aisle. She's been my steadfast supporter, role model, and greatest friend. When I told Dad and Tanya about my decision, Tanya fell into tears and Dad became enraged. They told me I was being selfish and that Tanya should also lead me down the aisle because she had been in my life for so long. I refused, stating that my mother is my soul mother and the person I want at my side on my wedding day. This sparked a heated dispute, with Dad threatening not to attend the wedding if Tanya wasn't given a particular position. He mentioned all the times Tanya tried to be there for me, the presents she bought, the activities she planned, but to me, such things pale in contrast to my mother's unwavering love and support. Tanya blamed me of never giving her a chance and claimed that after all these years, she considered me her own daughter. She brought up her miscarriage again, expressing how difficult it had been to lose a baby and then have her stepdaughter reject her. I understand that the miscarriage was difficult for her, but I don't think it's appropriate to use it as emotional leverage against me. I'm sticking to my decision, but now I'm wondering if I'm being too severe. Richard fully supports me, saying that it is our wedding and we should do whatever feels right to us. However, some of my extended family members believe I should make a compromise to keep the peace. Part of me feels bad for hurting Tanya's feelings, but a larger part of me is upset that Dad and Tanya are attempting to make my wedding about them. I've spent years attempting to negotiate this blended family arrangement, often at the price of my own emotions. I want my wedding day to be a celebration of love, not a battleground for old family feuds. Am I an asshole for refusing to have my stepmother lead me down the aisle? Should I stick to my decision or seek a compromise? Update 1. It's been a month since my previous post, and a lot has changed. First and foremost, I'd want to thank everyone for their encouraging words. They greatly increased my confidence in my decision. After the wedding quarrel, my father and Tanya stopped communicating to me for a few weeks. It was a stressful situation, and I found myself continually checking my phone, half expecting and half fearing a message from them. Richard was quite helpful at this time, telling me that it was acceptable to prioritize my own sentiments and that I was not responsible for controlling their emotions. Tanya called me unexpectedly, weeping. She apologized for pressing me throughout the years and stated that she simply wanted to be close to me. Her voice sounded truly sorry, and for a little time, I felt a ray of optimism that we might be able to go forward. She asked if we could meet for coffee to talk things over, and after some hesitation, I accepted, thinking it would be a good opportunity to clear the air before the wedding. We met in a neighborhood cafe that I used to frequent in college. It was weird to be seated across from Tanya in a setting that brought back memories of study sessions with friends and early dates with Richard. At first, everything appeared to be going well. Tanya was surprisingly sympathetic, even saying she accepted my choice to have my mother follow me down the aisle. She told my father some anecdotes about her own wedding, including how scared she was and how she wished she had a closer relationship with her stepmother. I found myself softening slightly, viewing her as a person with her own troubles and fears rather than the woman who had ended my parents' marriage. However, things took a turn when she mentioned that she and my father were thinking about renewing their vows next year. At first, I assumed she was just discussing their plans, but then she dropped a bombshell. She offered that I walk her down the aisle at their vow renewal ceremony to balance things out. This suggestion stunned me. It felt like she was attempting to establish a quid pro quo, as if my wedding and their vow renewal were somehow interchangeable. I explained that a daughter's wedding is not the same as a vow renewal. Tanya became agitated and accused me of not giving her a chance. She mentioned the miscarriage again, explaining how difficult it had been and how she had hoped that having a kid would bring our family closer together. She stated that losing the baby was especially devastating since she believed she had missed her chance to actually be a mother. I attempted to be empathetic, recalling how awful that time had been for everyone, but I also stated that her death, while tragic, did not require me to regard her as my mother. I said that I had my own complicated thoughts at the time, feeling both sad for their loss and pleased that I would not be replaced. The conversation rapidly degenerated from there. Tanya accused me of being cold-hearted and ungrateful for everything she had attempted to do for me over time. She mentioned every gift she had ever given me and every outing she had planned, as if keeping track of her attempts at motherhood. I emphasized that genuine connection and respect for limits are what sustain relationships, not gifts and forced outings. In the heat of the moment, I uttered something I had been keeping quiet for years. I informed Tanya that, while I was sad for her loss, I was tired of her using the miscarriage as emotional leverage. I said it wasn't fair to put the responsibility of her unfulfilled maternal urges on me, especially when I was only a teenager trying to deal with my own familial tragedy. Tanya burst into tears and walked out of the cafe, leaving me sitting there, feeling guilty, angry, and relieved that I had finally spoken my actual sentiments. As I sat there trying to digest what had just transpired, I couldn't help but think about how this cafe, which had once held wonderful memories, would now be forever connected with this awful confrontation. My father called me later that evening, enraged. He claimed I had been harsh to Tanya and owed her an apology. He accused me of being selfish and ungrateful, claiming that Tanya had always wanted to love me. When I tried to explain my side of the story, he interrupted me, stating that if I couldn't accept Tanya as my mother, Perhaps I shouldn't consider him my father anymore. Those remarks struck me hard. Despite our disagreements throughout the years, I never questioned that my father loved me. But in that moment, it felt like he was choosing Tanya above me, just like he had done years before when he abandoned our family for her. I am hurt and outraged, but I am also more certain than ever in my decision. Richard has been wonderfully supportive throughout this process, hugging me when I cry and assuring me that I have every right to set boundaries. We're going forward with our wedding plans, aiming to create a day that celebrates our love and the family we're starting together. My mother has also been fantastic. When I told her what had happened, she listened without judgment and offered consolation without attempting to influence my decision. She reminded me that family connections are complex and that it is acceptable to prioritize my own emotional well-being. After a few days of thought, I've decided to send my father and Tanya a farewell message. In it, I intend to express my emotions and boundaries clearly. I want to make it clear that, while I am open to having a connection with them, it must be on terms that respect my sentiments and my relationship with my mother. I'll tell them that if they can't accept it, they won't be invited to the wedding. As I sit here writing this message, I can't help but feel a mixture of loss and relief. It isn't the relationship I hope I could have with my father and stepmother, but it's the healthiest I can provide right now. Am I doing the right thing, or am I being overly harsh and potentially excluding them from this key day in my life? Update 2. Another month has passed, and things have only gotten more confusing. After I wrote a message to my father and Tanya describing my feelings and boundaries, I didn't hear from them for a few weeks. The silence provided both relief and anxiety. I tried to concentrate on wedding planning, finalizing the menu, having clothing fittings with my mother and working on our vows with Richard, but the unresolved problem with my father and Tanya remained in the back of my mind. Then, last Saturday, my father arrived to my flat unannounced. I was in the process of addressing invitations with Richard when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I was surprised to see my father standing there, fatigued and upset. I invited him in, more by surprise than anything else. Richard, sensing the tension, excused himself to give us some peace, but not before gently caressing my hand. When we were alone, Dad broke down. He informed me that Tanya had left him. Tanya apparently had a breakdown following our disagreement at the coffee shop and my message. She informed my father she couldn't take the rejection longer and needed to find herself. She packed her luggage and left to reside with her sister in another state. As I listened to my father pour out his heart, I was overcome with emotion. Part of me felt justified. Hadn't I been warning Tanya for years that her relationship to me was unhealthy? But another part of me felt guilty. Had my inability to accept her as a mother figure truly caused so much pain? Dad was a mess, alternately apologizing to me and blaming me for Tanya's departure. He explained that he didn't know how to solve things and asked if I would try family therapy with him and Tanya. The concept made me uncomfortable. I told him I wasn't prepared for that, especially since Tanya had left him and I wasn't sure where we all stood. Then my father revealed another bombshell. He admitted that years ago, when Tanya miscarried, they had been trying for a baby because Tanya believed it would help me accept her as a mother figure. He admitted that they were wrong to try to replace me or push a mother-daughter bond. This information surprised me. It explained a lot about their behavior over the years, including the increased pressure to bond with Tanya, the continuous comparisons to a real family, and the guilt-tripping following the miscarriage. However, it also made me angry. I felt manipulated, like my feelings had been ignored in their effort to build their ideal family. I told my father I needed time to comprehend everything and begged him to go. I was overwhelmed as I closed the door behind him. I contacted my mom because I needed her calm presence and smart guidance. She listened attentively as I explained everything, then suggested that I take some time to seriously consider what I want my relationship with my father and Tanya to look like in the future. Now I'm feeling conflicted. On the one hand, I feel vindicated in my decision to maintain boundaries with Tanya. Her leaving my father appears to demonstrate that her attachment to me was motivated more by her selfish desires than real concern for me. On the other side, I feel horrible for my father, who appears truly sorry and bewildered. Richard believes I should keep my boundaries, but be open to repairing a connection with my father over time. He pointed out that, while my father's confession regarding the pregnancy attempt was hard to hear, it was also a step forward in honesty that we had not experienced previously. My mother, when I told her what had transpired, was surprisingly sympathetic to my father. She believes that when individuals are thirsty for affection and acceptance, they can make serious blunders. She reminded me of how young my father was when they had me, and how he may have been attempting to recreate the family life he believed he had lost. The wedding is now only a month away, and I'm not sure what to do about my father's invitation. Should I still invite him, giving him the opportunity to be a part of this special day? Should I contact Tanya now that I understand her motivations? Should I focus on my own happiness while they deal with their problems? As I sit here, staring at the stack of unsent invites, I understand that this decision is about more than the wedding. It's about the future relationship I desire with my father and whether Tanya has a role in my life. It's about striking a balance between compassion and self-protection, as well as determining what forgiveness looks like in a circumstance where the wounds are deep. Update 3. The wedding was last weekend, and I wanted to provide a last update on how everything worked out. After considerable thought and several long conversations with Richard and my mother, I decided to keep my father's invitation to the wedding open, but I made it plain that it was only for him and not Tanya. I sent him a long email explaining my decision. I informed him that I was willing to work on our relationship, but it would take time, and that he needed to respect my boundaries. I also conveyed my wish that he would attend the wedding to celebrate this special day in my life, but I understood if he felt unable to attend without Tanya. To my amazement, my father accepted these terms. He responded to my email again, apologizing for everything and expressing his want to be present on my wedding day. He also stated that he and Tanya were still separated, and that he was beginning to see how much their relationship had influenced me over the years. Last-minute preparations dominated the week leading up to the wedding. My mother was an unwavering source of support, assisting with everything from floral arrangements to easing my pre-wedding nerves. Richard's family visited from out of town, and witnessing how well they got along with my mother made me happy for the loving, drama-free family I would marry into. On the wedding day, I was a ball of nervousness and excitement as my mother helped me into my dress. We both shed tears as she told me how proud she was of the lady I'd become and how glad she was that Richard and I had met. It was a memory I'll keep forever. The ceremony was amazing. Walking down the aisle with my mother by my side felt just beautiful. I noticed my father seated in one of the front rows, appearing distraught yet smiling when our gazes met. Richard's reaction when he saw me go down the aisle was all I had hoped for and more. During the reception, I was busy welcoming visitors and enjoying the festivities with Richard, but I noticed my father looking sad and lonely at moments. He put on a brave face whenever he noticed me gazing. To my amazement, he had a cordial chat with my mother at one point. They were never going to be friends, but the fact that they could be in the same room without causing tension was a relief. After the wedding, after things had settled down a little, my father and I had a long conversation. He apologized once more for everything and promised to try harder to be a good father. He recognized that he had made numerous mistakes, particularly in attempting to force a connection between Tanya and myself. He also informed me that Tanya had decided to stay with her sister indefinitely, and they were discussing a trial separation. I'm cautiously enthusiastic about mending my relationship with my father. We've decided to start with monthly dinners for just the two of us to reconnect without pressure. It won't be easy, and there'll be a lot of pain to deal with, but I'm willing to try. I chose not to contact Tanya right now. I believe we both require time and space to recover and move forward. Maybe eventually we'll be able to talk about everything that happened, but for now, I'm focused on my new life with Richard and mending my relationship with my father. This entire experience has been a roller coaster, but I'm glad I held my ground. I'm starting my married life with a better awareness of my family dynamics and more firm limits. The wedding proved to be more than simply a celebration of my love for Richard. It also marked a fresh beginning in my relationship with my parents. Richard and I are finally settling into married life, and it feels great to face the future together, knowing we can deal with anything that comes our way. We are planning a belated honeymoon to Japan next month, which we are both looking forward to. Thank you to everyone who helped me on this journey. Your guidance and encouragement helped me get through this terrible situation and begin this new chapter in my life on a positive note. It won't be easy, and there'll be a lot of pain to deal with, but I'm willing to try.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.
My neglectful dad and scheming stepmom tried to steal my home for my spoiled pregnant stepsister, but karma just hit them hard. Recently learning how much I, M34, make, my dad, M62, is miserably self-centered. Generally missing. Unbelievably, he chose to evict me from my own house, all in the name of family. My stepsister and tiny gem, Ash, F29, who can do nothing wrong, has miraculously become pregnant. She struggles to find herself a place to stay as her highly self-reliant aspirations are those of an escort and an OnlyFans model. Now Dad wants everything fixed, and I am the fixer. I regretfully had to part from my house and my hard-earned money with this woman since she made all the wrong decisions. The man my dad openly turned off as a duty several times is me. Ever since he learned about my new residence, job, and shockingly low income though, he has become somewhat sensitive about our shared blood. Although I'm not thrilled with him constantly telling me who my father is, he also wants to deepen the ties I have with his wife and her daughter. She is my dad's child as well, but I was banished far too early to establish any type of relationship with the woman. I'm glad I didn't since I would have been somewhat let down. I simply want to remind everyone before you all start that I'm here to let out my feelings. I have ideas, opinions and sentiments to put down. Though you may disagree and they might not sound good to you, I am just letting you know regardless since, to be honest, I have no one else to tell. Now let me present my half-sister Ash, short Ashlyn. She is literally making her dad proud. She is about 5 years younger than I am. Dad is delusional as this woman is out there only serving as an escort, sleeping with a bunch of OnlyFans, and my father calls her his pride. You did really read correctly. I suppose he is not familiar with the major deal. Someone is going to tell him. Though I'm not too conservative, I try to concentrate on my morals and profession. When I have the time to get to know them better, I court women. There is occasionally a spark, but other elements also play a role including vast distance and availability problems. Other times, one finds absolutely no understanding. I try not to spend random nights sleeping with anyone. I ought to wait for the proper woman. I get sick looking at a large body count. Guys displaying it like a medal is repulsive. I'm not sure why. Still, this is what I live by in my own life. Unfortunately, my sister holds the reverse view. She most certainly no longer counts her physical partners. She is now an escort, which personally repels me. Moreover, it is quite harmful as well. Certain guys enjoy performing odd activities for escorts. I have no idea how someone would view working like that as being acceptable. She then posts indecent movies and pictures of herself on the internet in order to profit from it, but she finds little success there. She most likely lacks knowledge on how to start the traffic, but for whatever reason it is a flop. From what sources am I aware of this? Here is an awkward story. My friend mentioned it to me. Ash asked him if he wanted to have fun after texting him once following their drink meeting. Hearing the narrative, I had already warmed up a little when the man left with my sister, but, he said it was only after he realized she was my sister. He told me she had emailed him the URL to her page, and he showed me too. I'm not sure whether he is speaking the truth. She breaks constantly and begs Dad for money, hence I believe she isn't doing very well. I never told Dad either. I couldn't even bring myself to question her about it straight. I observed her answering a call then seated in the car with an old man another time. He left her flowers and headed off. She would sneak back into the house at strange hours through the window. This became evident when I used to return home over holidays from college. Though I'm not sure if she is still at it, I do not want to be involved in any of it. I'm glad about having a respectable post where I work. At last, I haven't lived much with the new family since my dad was disturbed enough to send me away any opportunity he could have. But I have seen Ash close enough to claim she follows her mother, Marissa, F58. Marissa thought she was really the icon in her heyday. She was really beautiful to men like my dad and used to be a flight attendant. If you know what I mean, she is now a regular botched face Karen. She runs the sort of neighborhood childcare and has hands like those of a claw, nails longer than her lipstick. Odd how parents would leave their children with someone like that. She could point out a child's eye with such long nails. She is, nevertheless, exactly as pokey as her nails. She loves to create trouble in other people's life and opinions about anything. She has more plastic in her body than the sea and a quite terrible voice. She is as real as phony leather. She affects Dad for the worst. She didn't want to raise a child that wasn't her own, hence I think she was a big factor in my dad not thinking twice before sending me 8 years to boarding school. Let me then introduce you to my dad. Actually, he is more the main cause of all this. Having lived a complete life, he believes anything he does in life is justified even if it is far, far from it since he understands better. He laments having me since I'm not like him. Thank you God, I am not. My mother was a formidable woman. She looked after my dad well and clearly knew her priorities, yet they clashed. I should never forget that she used to tell me Dad was just a different person, not a horrible one. He will always be my dad regardless of what happens. She was a good person though. She didn't want to contaminate my views against my father. He was definitely as intolerable to her as he is now. Few months later, they split and divorced. 4 years old at the time. 2 months after the divorce, my dad then wed Marissa. When I reached 5, they had Ash. Later, my mother passed away in a car accident. She was out to come pick me from school, so I can't forget that. She had always been on time, she just missed 10 minutes once. Though it seemed to me like an hour, it was only 10 minutes. A drunk hit her at a crossroads. He made it, she did not. A few years ago he got a DUI, and I was left alone permanently. I waited in the school. It took them 2 hours to arrive to pick me up. My dad had come, hence I was misled and puzzled. His irritation when he turned to dead-faced Marissa and asked what they should do about me will never fade. She answered, "Your kid, your problem. Specifically, Dad. You cannot now come and tell me I will have to look after your spoiled child. At last I have steady work and oversee some side enterprises. Since I turned 15, I have been earning and have worked quite hard. I started boarding school, then moved to college, only visiting over the holidays, so I started living alone 8 years ago. I recently bought a property after working very hard to reach where I am. This is a wonderful modest house, far better than the apartment I had with buddies. I felt I would never be able to reach this life aim. Actually, I just moved in last month. Although I might not like my family much, fundamental politeness was to involve them in a moment this significant, thus I asked them to the housewarming as well. Watching his response was quite depressing. As he inquired about the furniture, the architect and the interior designer, he seemed jealous, to be honest, a bit annoyed. When I provided him what I believed was sufficient information, he answered with taunts such as, "I wouldn't know, you never bothered telling me," trying to get attention and clearly show our weak connection in front of friends and business associates, including my boss. 1 week went by and he called me. I had an intricate job to oversee while at work. I accepted since he mentioned he needed to meet urgently. When I got home, Marissa and puffy, red-eyed Ash were glaring from the living room and I avoided her. Dad was in the kitchen pulling beers from the refrigerator. He gave me one, and I graciously turned him down fearing what he might say. When I asked him what he wanted from me, he furrowed his eyebrows and answered another question, asking whether I had lately started complaining about us. Not sure what he was getting at, I scowled in uncertainty. He invited me to hang in the living room with Ash and Marissa. I nodded and turned to settle on a couch across from the two. Ash folded her arms. Marissa rolled her eyes. Dad came in and sat with them facing me. Leaving his beer bottle on the sofa table, he leaned back. Then he wanted to know whether I was blind. There was a pause, probably bewilderment on my end and rage on theirs. He said before I could reply that I either choose not to notice things that ought to be seen or I am blind. He stated I had most likely become somewhat proud ever since I bought a property and avoided looking at the individuals who really mean something to me. I groaned and asked him what he meant by all of that, wanting that he would be more explicit. He blew sarcastically, then informed me I wasn't disturbed by the dire circumstances in the room. He stated I had elected not to offer or be of any kind of assistance and that I had chosen not to notice the family was in risk. I obviously asked him what risk he meant. Glancing across at Ash, who rolled her eyes and declared she was pregnant. Like any other person, I wanted to congratulate her, but she started crying before I could. Marissa hugged her and advised me to be concerned enough to find out what's happening at home. Dad stated Ash recently discovered she was pregnant, and the lad who caused it had broken up with her since. Marissa also mentioned that Ash has decided to maintain it, hence our basis for next decisions should be based on that. Can she afford it? All I could say. Ash and Marissa stared death at me. To be honest, I meant good. I was worried. I was actually ready to help her, but in my thoughts I had already imagined perhaps they wanted me to contribute financially. Dad then got up and moved over to my side to sit down with me. That's why he called me, he stated afterwards. He added that although maybe my mother neglected to educate me how to be a good brother, brothers would throw their life away for the comfort of their sisters. He said he is a nice parent to his daughter. I ask for your effing pardon. I'm not dying for her, but I know my financial input is required. I sighed and asked him what action he wanted me to take about it. He said, "That's my good boy," grinned, rubbed my back. I forced a phony smile, which vanished the instant Dad said, "You're giving Ashlyn your house." "No, I am not." Dad answered straight away. "Yes, that's what I said." Dad scowled and asked me why not. I told him I could help with some cash, but the house is mine. Until she can afford it, I can let her share a room free from rent. Dad got up from his chair then said, "Nonsense. Dad, it makes perfect sense to me." He insisted nevertheless, that I not only offer her the house but also move out and buy another for myself. I contended that if Ash is unemployed and expecting a kid, she cannot even afford to run the house or pay the expenses. Those, Dad informed me, would also be my obligations. Apologize to me? Hell to the number one. Though I was enraged, I had to be polite. Thus I got to my feet and informed him that it was not feasible and that I would now be departing. I then turned to go. He wasn't content to stop there. 1 week later, he turned up at my place when I was at work. I'm not sure how he entered or where he picked the keys from, but when I returned home I observed men loading boxes loaded with my belongings outside the house. Hurrying inside, I asked them what they were doing and they informed me the house owner had told them to toss the goods. I said that they should go right away and that I owned the house, they should get my belongings back inside. I lost my composure. Coming home, this was the last thing I would have predicted seeing. When I went inside to see Dad and Ash, they still stood there insisting I follow what brothers ought to do. They ignored my advice to leave, thus I informed them I will contact the police. They went at last, badmouthing me, applying curses and things. Though I know this is a lot to read, it was much worse in person. 1 week has gone by and I'm posting here since I kind of feel horrible about it. Was I in error? I feel like they need me and I shouldn't cut them off like this, but I also feel like my actions for them have limitations. Growing up, their disconnection and lack of concern for me infuriates me. Today, they ask me to lay my life down for them. Bit much, not sure what you mean here. Tell me, let me know. I couldn't even get my buddies involved in this. Right now you are all I have. Update. Hey everybody. I hope every one of you is good. I posted 1 week ago, and to be honest I didn't expect the attention it attracted. As the comments arrived, some made me doubt a number of things. Not too long afterward though, I decided not to break off my family completely. This came about via Ash calling me. I welcomed her by telling me she wanted to see me. She wanted to tell me a few things, therefore she asked to meet at my place, but I was still getting used to the scenario made last time. I urged us to meet somewhere else. She was first somewhat nervous when we visited a coffee shop. She seemed somewhat unlike herself, but generally she is rather conceited and unpleasant. She told me she had lately been broken off with as we sat in the corner. I answered, claiming I had an idea since Dad mentioned the man who got her pregnant had left her. She shook her head and said Dad believes that. She told me that although Dad believes her BF left her due to commitment problems, in fact she is the one with the commitment problems. Unbelievably, right? She said she truly loved this man, but he had discovered some things about her just a few days before she told him she was pregnant. She spoke first, therefore infuriating him even though he wanted to address her about those things. In that instant he became rather insane and drilled a hole in the wall. He frightened her, she claimed. He then said he was divorcing her and left without hearing her reply. She has been trying to phone him non-stop, but he hardly reacts. He has only once texted her back, advising her to let the child go first and inform him. He will only talk to her at all then, but she has to part from the child to have that opportunity. Now I know Ash ain't a saint, but this man. This person really bothers me greatly. She remarked it would be strange to tell a brother about the topics I just questioned her about. I shrugged and stated that it's okay if she doesn't want to tell me since I kind of realized she was most likely referring to the OnlyFans and escorting. She pulled in a great breath and let it out before I could ask her what she wanted to meet for. She then told me she had been engaged in dubious activities. Though I truly wanted to hear validation of all my doubts, I was concerned. She told me she wanted to paint and be an artist, but Marissa informed her she wouldn't get a decent life or income from it. Ash was advised she had to start looking for a man right now. She first felt disgusted as she soon enough began attracting the attention of elderly guys. She told Ash that it was a good thing when she informed Marissa about it. That is, the older males making any money at all, knowing what to do with their money. At the time Ash was just 19, and Marissa informed her college she would not or could not provide a decent, pleasant living. Ash had youth. Many would have paid for it. Ash resolved she wanted to be a model. She tried several modeling agencies but none seemed to be interested in her. She then ran into a man in his 40s claiming he could land her a job. He purchased her pricey outfits and jewels for the functions and drove her to gatherings. She was content till her first gig was mentioned. She turned out was selling her time to a man in order to pay for a modeling contract. She spent the evening as she assumed it would only be dinner. That was it. She did have a little modeling contract where she photographed a little brand. A few more men used her while she was hoping for a gig in exchange, but she was informed they chose not her. She then discovered that the man making investments in her was actually profiteering off of her. She was terrified he would have her killed, hence she considered it foolish to face him. She then informed him she was fine with low pay and that she no longer wanted to pursue modeling. He fortunately let her depart without any problems. She then attempted to wait tables in bars, and it proved rather difficult for her. Ash, hard-earned money is exactly what that is. Still, she also mentioned that Marissa would make fun of her for opting for those little tasks. Marissa would explain that women should be taken good care of. They are the beauty of this planet and should just be there to shine and smile like a showpiece, etc. Ash thus began to go out with men just for supper, but she charged for it. She claimed that although many loners out there simply wanted interaction, too many ended up with stalkers and obsessive males believing they were owed more than what they had paid for. She started escorting when she realized that interacting with men and having them feel close to her caused more trouble than sleeping with them. It worked great until a friend mentioned OnlyFans. She tried to get it rolling, but her editing and camera handling were not particularly strong. She wasn't social enough, thus that didn't work either. It takes a lot of effort. She next ran across her lover, BF, an ex-coworker. He returned often because he worked as a barista. Though he was too clingy, she really liked him. He also lacked trust in her and was a bit possessive. Given that she was indeed still on OnlyFans and an escort under his unaware knowledge, he had every reason to question her. Her BF started looking after her with the meager income she made when she stopped escorting and left OnlyFans totally. She seemed good with it, Marissa wasn't. She then fell pregnant, and her boyfriend discovered everything. She mentioned that a couple of the individuals on the list might be possible fathers. Every one of them donated money to help the child and her. One of them had even proposed to her, but she knows all of them are doing since they believe they are the only ones there, which is silly given she is an escort. She does not, however, tell them straight out that she pays her expenses and most likely helps with the kid. She said she decided to tell me all this since she couldn't tell Dad. Dad believes she has only been modeling here and there, makes little money, and that she had one man in her life who left her. Marissa mostly understands when he should have stayed. She advises Ash to wed the man who proposed and let him believe he is the father. Ash doesn't know, though, what to tell Dad. She also doesn't want to let anyone believe a lie and wants not to wed the guy since he is strange and ancient. She mentioned that some financial support would be great and that she wanted me to make up with Dad. I asked her what she wanted me to help with. She advised me to consent to what Dad asked and then spend some time away. I could then return when things are less contentious. How then is that a solution? I politely turned down her offer and informed her I could only provide some money. Nevertheless, I wasn't comfortable leaving my own residence. She then informed me I lacked the least bit of decency to assist her out, that she exposed her entire existence to me and that I was selfish thinking like way. She stated, even then, Dad was correct about me and I deserved to be sent to an orphanage instead of taken in when I needed somewhere to live. She stood up and stamped off. Though I believe my response was not too severe, is it selfish? Actually, what do you believe her side of the tale tells? Does it support her expectations? Should I trust her? She seemed to be speaking the truth, but does it follow that I should follow her advice? Tell me, everyone. Update. Right now, this is what is picking at my brain. A few things have transpired after another week. I assumed I would hit the keys and notify you all about it. I appreciate your help on my earlier update, gentlemen. Having folks back up my ideas for once is rather relieving. Still, Dad called me once I met Ash. He wanted to meet with me at the pub to sort out a few things. Interested, I agreed and went to see him. He mentioned he knew how much I was making as we sat at the counter. When I questioned him about why it mattered, he stated he knew I could afford to buy another property in a few years. I shrugged and said I already had a house, thus this conversation ought to be quite over. He maintained that since I didn't yet have a family and that single women find it more difficult to raise a child. That child needed a safe place he could call home. I reminded Dad then, that Ash had been living with them long enough and that nothing seemed to be an issue. A small child won't harm. I also asked him what she would do, pregnant, living alone in a big house. She needs to be surrounded by others so that she could be looked after, I remarked. Dad surprised me once again at that point. He said Marissa and he would move in with Ash into my house. My hearing let me realize something. The bartender laughed sarcastically before I could react to that. Dad objected and inquired about what he found so humorous. He said, Ash. She uses everyone, he remarked, then tosses them away. He nodded, declaring he was her lover when my dad questioned him about who he was referring to. My eyes opened, so this was the man. Dad balled his fists and asked the man why he felt it was acceptable to establish a family he couldn't sustain. He spoke angrily. Holding his hands up, the man informed Dad he had no bearing on the family in issue. He also showed no desire in rearing a child not of his own. Dad pushed him to say why he felt that. He grinned and explained that although Ash still got pregnant, he had a vasectomy last year since he didn't want any children. He also discovered her driving off with several males following her lies on her whereabouts. Then he learned she had an OnlyFans page. He found none of it believable. That was the last straw for him when Ash at last told him they were expecting. He couldn't have a child, hence it verified everything. Knowing this, he told Ash she had been cheating on him all through. She let the truth fly free. While my ears were focused on Dad's voice, all I could see was his face moving from wrath to disbelief to disappointment. He shrugged and informed us she owed Ash money, time, honesty, at least love. He owed nothing else. He stated he was unsure whether Dad knew any of it, but he knew no dad would be ashamed of a child like that. Dad stiffened his lip, got off the stool silently, and turned away. He texted me later that evening, saying he had to go get Marissa from her yoga session. I'm not sure what happened after that, but I'm sure it was something as Ash was at my door sobbing the very following day. I wrecked everything, she informed me. To stifle a scene, I drew her inside and calmed her down. I told her I told Dad nothing. It was her boyfriend, the bartender Dad and I had visited. Then she told me Dad advised her to stay at home and stop everything. He claimed he never expected she would turn to such methods and felt disgusted by her. He advised her to pick a decent man and straighten her behavior. He also noted that these days her chances of meeting decent men were somewhat limited. I hugged her and listened to her. Dad had just returned from seeing me when he confronted her, so she stated she was sorry believing it was me. I forgave her, then she returned home. She added that Marissa was really quiet when Dad was discussing wonderful women and their loyalty, like she couldn't say anything, while she was raging and telling me how terrible she felt. Ash stated it's among the topics Marissa avoids talking about. She answered that Marissa couldn't have an opinion since she is yoga, so I asked her what she meant by that. I could only grimace in perplexity before Ash carried on crying as she related what else had transpired. Yoga, said stayed with me. Actually, what do you suppose happened? Will Ash still be Dad's pride source? Nobody has approached me ever since. Still, I will see and let you all know. I know y'all probably didn't expect me to get back to you so soon, but I couldn't help it. Update. 2 days after my last upload, and I am here for the ones inquiring. Although Ash's ex's name is not important, we may call him Bob. This is the fresh bit. I saw Dad the day before yesterday. I informed him I had some decisions made. I said I was ready to let Ash use a room and I wanted to assist raise her child. I would be fine paying for the diapers and other supplies, but she needs to start working right away. Dad informed me then that nobody would be with the kid, hence I advised her to attempt working from home or freelancing. This time, Dad wasn't his usual nasty self. He stopped and then let out a sigh. Telling me he felt I despised him, he settled on the couch. He was correct, but I probed him about his reasoning. Mom despised him too, thus he said, which was why. She never said that. I told him fast. Instead, she constantly stated Dad loved me and worried about me. I told him the only reason I felt let down at all was how inaccurate my view of Dad was. Mom told me all that. Then from Dad I sensed only absolute neglect and lack of caring. Rubbing his eyes, he confided in me he loathed himself for many ways. He stated he liked Mom, but they hadn't known enough to determine whether they were really each other's type. He sighed and added he had to marry her since he got her pregnant. Though he never felt the spark between them, she was a good wife to him. He next crossed paths with Marissa. I could feel my insides tingling at that. I remained motionless. None of this was known to me. Dad told me Marissa sparked a flame in him he never knew he possessed. He caught emotions before he knew it. He was quite delighted with her. Marissa became pregnant too before he could negotiate his way through rights and obligations. She was pregnant, therefore it was too late even if he informed her it was bad. He urged her to wait. He wanted to tell Mom first, but Marissa came to our house feeling nervous. She reported everything to Mom. She explained everything to Mom. Dad took it when Mom challenged him. Mom was really hurt in this quite unpleasant episode, yet even then she remained courteous and requested Dad for a divorce. My parents separated. Y'all, Dad had an affair with my stepmom and got her pregnant. I'm not sure just how much worse this dude could be. Dad stopped and glanced across at me. He stated he had to return me home after spending a good year with Marissa when Mom passed away. Marissa despised every aspect of it. Again, driven by guilt or something, she was worried that Dad could put me before their kid somehow. 3 years later, he sent me off to boarding school, and subsequently I never had to remain home long enough to cause Marissa any trouble. Love makes you do stupid things, he remarked, and I wanted to punch this man in the face, but I restrained myself. Turning back, I found Marissa standing in the gateway carrying a water bottle. She claimed to be just heading to the yoga class. Setting her bottle on the table, she headed into the kitchen. I blinked, then she was back and was through the door before I could think clearly. Numb, hence I followed her out. I grabbed her water bottle to give back to her. She had already got in her car and was leaving when I came out. To help me to relax, I silently sat in my car and gently drove after her. She pulled out from parking outside a yoga club. She turned to glance around her and then began down an alley. She once more turned around and climbed into another car. She kissed and hugged the driver and they headed off. I was hardly able to blink. I locked my jaw, parked, got out, and entered the yoga club. When I asked them about Marissa checking in, they denied providing personal information. I insisted I was at least told if she were there, saying I was frightened about her. They informed me they had no customers under that name. I returned to my car and waited. I have no idea what came over me, but I started filming when the second car rolled in. Then slapped her butt as she happily headed to the parking lot when a man got out and opened her door for her, hugged her and kissed her. For yoga, Marissa, so much is different. I left before she arrived at the parking lot. My dad cheated on my mother, thus he is currently being cheated on as well. Karma is. Dad has phoned me several times, but I didn't answer. All I want right now is go and question Marissa about it, so I'm going to see what happens. Should I change? Hello y'all, I believe this to be most likely the last update. And I know it's a week late, y'all anticipated it to be sooner, but so much occurred this week. I first managed to man up and approach Marissa. I went when Ash was asleep and Dad was not home. Was she scheduled for yoga that day? She claimed to have it every day, on Sundays included. Cooking spaghetti in the kitchen, who was her yoga teacher? I asked her. She chose a name at random. Was that a guy? I asked her. Saying no, she chuckled and asked, why would I take a boy? She had a female instructor at the club she visited, so I told her it was odd since none of the other clubs had female instructors. She corrected me, but her voice startled me and her hands were no longer swirling the pasta sauce. They told me I had joined the club yesterday. I told her that. How could I know where her club was? She asked. I informed her I visited last time following her. She let go of a spoon. I grabbed it, and she spun around. What are you getting at? She asked. I then informed her what I observed. She disputed it as was natural. I mentioned I saw it with my own eyes. She shrugged and said Dad would never accept me. At least he would believe his own eyes, I told her after pulling out my phone and running through the footage. She stood stunned and spent a minute not speaking. Her face then relaxed, and she carried on cooking noodles. She stated it was useless now. She was already preparing for a divorce anyhow. My eyes grew wide. This woman was horrible. My dad deserved all of it, granted, but oh, she's a serpent. She informed me that her sweetheart of 3 years ago is the man she visits at the club. When it was safe to do so, they resurrected their passion. She stated they had fallen in love long ago, but at the time he was wed to another woman whose father had employed him for his business. Though there was a lot at risk, Marissa and her boyfriend decided he should keep his marriage intact and handle his money. He would then split from his wife and live with Marissa. But Marissa became pregnant and, as women should, she was trying to pin a man down for support. She made that decision to hang around Dad. They were seeing one another on and off, but Marissa chose Dad and told him he had to act when she met her boyfriend and got pregnant. She had to handle things herself since he developed cold feet, and that's when she spoke with Mom. She's good right now. Her partner is a widower and has a business. She said women should do what they can, kid, and turned around smiling. Her smile stopped though, as she peered over my shoulder. The next instant her smile vanished. I turned back to see Dad in the gateway with flaming eyes and clenched hands. He was shaking. Dad awakened Ash then and carried her to the kitchen. Who was her father? He asked. She shook her head and glanced across at Marissa. She assured him she always recognized him to be her dad, thus she didn't give blood any thought. Pacing the floor, he ran his fingers through his hair. Marissa and Ash were instructed to leave his house 2 days later. The divorce is underway. At a shelter are Ash and Marissa. Dad has requested me to locate him as a therapist, and he has been rather quiet since. I pardon him every single time. Regarding Marissa, her boyfriend didn't bring her in. He disputes having ever spoken with her. Marissa has begged me for the proof, I have it. She even begged me to consider Ash through her pregnancy. And what can I say, Marissa? Your child, your challenge? From what standpoint should I act? Either destroy the footage or hand it up. I'll let others know in the comments soon later. I appreciate you joining me and for your ideas and encouragement. It means a great deal.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.